Good morning. I'm going to approach it slightly differently, as it says, by focusing on three different ways of mobilizing community knowledge in the service of community safety. I'm going to start with the model of improvement districts. So the aim is to reduce the incidence of crime, and very strongly connected with it, not a separate issue at all, is increasing the cleanliness. And so what the improvement district does is it brings together a whole number of partners. The primary one being municipality, constantly linking with them to see that they are playing their role in whatever it might be. It might be electricity, it might be water, it might be public health, all those things. And adding what they can through their partnership with the City Council in the area that has been designated. They also, as has been shown very clearly in the history of our local improvement districts, they have to then start taking account of the state of living of the people who find themselves there, who are not ratepayers. They're not homeowners. In fact, they're homeless. They are present all over the world, and certainly South Africa is not different in this. And would be completely ethically and politically unacceptable for an improvement district to imagine that all it has to do is just to clean up the show and remove those who do not fit the pattern. And it is very striking to see how improvement districts such as the Central City Improvement District have engaged more and more closely with NGOs and service providers such as Cartwright, the Haven, all these other organizations who are professionally focused on providing services for the homeless. So it's not just a matter of sweeping the streets clean, not just of dirt, but of people. That cannot happen. So there's been a great learning experience, I think, in improvement districts in South Africa. I was involved in one of the tiniest ones, which is Muizenberg, where we had exactly the same problems and challenges and similar responses. So what is there in common among improvement districts? It's the possibility of taking an overall view of a particular area and bringing together all the particular partners who have a special and unique role to play. So this is a kind of partnership building which is focused on action. Who is the best possible agency or person to deliver this kind of service? And how can we make it possible for that to happen without unnecessary impediments? That's what partnership is about. It's focused in order to achieve certain goals. So in this case, what is the role of the community? I started with the improvement districts because it's at one end, as it were, of a spectrum of how communities may be engaged. In this case, the community there, one level, are the owners, the property owners who pay the rates. And their role is really to pay the rates, right? It's a contribution. It's a very necessary contribution, without which that kind of improvement for all concerned there in livability could not take place. But it's not a very active one. They obviously have to be consulted, they are surveyed, they can bring up their complaints, and I'm sure people in the improvement district here know very well that they are very vocal enough because they have paid their extra and they want to see results. But it is not a very direct engagement of community. So that's one end of the spectrum. But this is neither good nor bad. I'm not ranking these in an order of A, B, C. This is one way of improving safety in a particular area. And in South Africa, it has to take place in a way which is accountable generally, and that it improves livability for everybody within that area, not just the people who happen to have the property. The next one I want to look at is the model of neighbourhood watch. This also is internationally something that is very well known. And neighbourhood watch conventionally is regarded as or defined as citizens being the eyes and ears of the police. That's the way it is conventionally recognized. And the way that it is actually implemented is through patrolling, through going out in the streets of the neighborhood that you know. This is where the local knowledge comes in, and using your local knowledge of circumstances, of the layout of the place, of the kind of people, or where the Takesa are, wherever it might be, in order to support the police in dealing with crime. Now, I don't want to knock this at all, because where it is effectively done in an accountable way, and which recognizes the limitations of citizen activity, that you cannot simply become law enforcement officers, where this takes place within that kind of very clear understanding of the mutual contribution of the police and the citizens who are doing the patrolling, this can be very effective up to a point. But what I'm proposing here, and not just personally, what I'm going to be suggesting here comes out of work being done in the Department of Community Safety of the Western Cape to refresh and extend the idea of what a neighbourhood watch might be, in a way which could draw more broadly and effectively on the great resource of community knowledge. Because it's all very well to be doing the patrolling and the work of the police, but that's essentially when it's already happened, right? When the problem's already happened or is about to happen and you're trying to deal with it. And this has to be done. Law enforcement is absolutely essential. Effective law enforcement, whether it's police, metro police, whoever it might be, detectives, is essential in building safety in the community. And don't misunderstand me. What I'm suggesting here, and what I think the Department of Community Safety is investigating afresh, is what is the role of community knowledge in complementing, not merely supporting the police, but complementing it. It's like the image that I use is like having two legs, you know? And I could dance. I'm not going to demonstrate, although I love dancing, but I could dance on one leg. But it's a bit kind of constricting. Yeah? So the other leg is equally vital, which is how do you mobilize community knowledge in its own right, not just as a supplement, in its own right, to create better safety in particular neighborhoods. And let me explain what I mean by this in relation to Neighborhood Watch. In investigating several very active neighborhood watches around Cape Town a year or so ago, and going to CPF meetings too, a similar kind of activity, I constantly heard the complaint: we have a lot of people in the community who say they're interested in improving community safety, but we don't have enough people coming out on patrol, and this is a problem. My answer is no. Why should everybody patrol? Some people are good at it, are accountable, they make a very good use of this, and they genuinely support the police in being eyes and ears in that respect. But there was one of them, for example, said we've got about 1,000 people on our books as wanted to join the Neighbourhood Watch, but we have about 150 regular patrollers. And I thought, wow, isn't that fantastic? You've got 1,000 people who have said they're interested in making a difference to the community. But most of them say, no, I'd rather not patrol. Well, why should they? What else can they do? What we have in communities is an absolutely untapped treasure of potential improvement of communities through understanding what the people themselves have to offer. So, for example, I'll take the example around Berkeley, the BKM watch was an extraordinarily effective one. And there are many people in that fairly well-off community with all kinds of experiences and all kinds of levels of education, and some of them with time on their hands, retired people. So one of the things that a neighbourhood watch could do is to regard itself as a kind of clearinghouse for how do you access all the kinds of contributions to building the safety of the community that are there potentially and are not being used. And I'm one of the work that I'm doing within community safety at the moment is developing training modules which will assist will provide a way in for people in a neighborhood to get to recognize what they themselves can contribute in addition to patrolling. So, for example, you might have a retired teacher who absolutely loves reading and who could be directed towards going to read to children in a community library on a Saturday morning. Not necessarily in the place where they live already, for example, Berkeley, because that's probably already happening. But what about on the other side of the tracks? You know, a neighbouring community, which could be regarded by people as the place where the trouble comes from, right? Of the people who come cruising around the streets. Yeah. What about taking yourself into there and establishing that kind of relationship? So that's just one tiny example, and this is something which we're just exploring now and are going to be testing as a way of not replacing neighbourhood watches, but of extending and deepening the kind of contribution that they could potentially make to the safety of their own community. And in this Department of Community Safety can play a facilitating role. Just a very brief note on provincial departments of community safety. We've all got them. And it's a difficult thing because they don't have an explicit mandate in the way that health has and education has. They don't have a law enforcement mandate other than through provincial traffic, for example. They have police oversight mandate, which is something that always has to be negotiated and renegotiated. But then the possibility is, okay, what else can we do? And what the community safety can do, and attempts to do, and it wants to do better and better, is to be this facilitative element, not to extend an empire, but to extend the assistance in identifying ways in which communities can themselves make a contribution and supporting them in this way. So that's the second one. So we started with the improvement district, moved the neighbourhood watch, where we have a far greater actual and potential engagement of individuals in the community in helping to build safety. The third one I want to go to was a program which I was also personally involved in, which started in the community of Zwelathemba in the end of 1997 and grew into something called peace committees. And in this case, we went with the support of the then Minister of Justice, the late Donna Omar, into this particular community of Worcester. And after quite a lot of consultation in the community, the answer that came out, here was a community expressing its needs. It said, actually, where we really would like your help is assisting us to deal with all the small arguments and problems in the community that don't get resolved. And they then turn into more and more frustration, and then it escalates and it escalates until it becomes a police problem. And we don't like this, because the police aren't able to deal with someone I lent someone 50 rand and they didn't get it back. The police, there are other things the police should be doing. So what we developed with the community in Zwelathemba was something that came to be called peace committees. And just very simply put, it's a dispute resolution mechanism, which can be easily adapted to all kinds of different circumstances. There's a regulatory framework, and so it started from a problem. Someone comes and they say, I've got a problem, help me. And the system that was adopted was not at all, it's not a court, it has no authority, none at all, no punishment possible, don't even think about it. And it's not about blaming, it's trying to investigate, where did this problem come from? And once we've established it, how are we going to help that it doesn't happen again? So I've got these three examples, and I'm not saying that one is better than another. I'm just taking them as a range of the examples of the very many ways in which communities can play more or less active roles and have their knowledge respected and taken seriously. And from the improvement district, where they provide the funding and pushing and questioning and asking for value for money, through Neighbourhood Watch, which is already a very active, kind of a useful enterprise, provided it stays within lawful bounds, but can be, I think, very, very beneficially extended in a way which is very empowering to communities, and then to peace committees, which is absolutely on the ground, able to deal with individual problems as they arise in a facilitated and non-judgmental way, and a very pragmatic way of finding solutions. So just to sum up, to come back to some of the broader questions, what a community needs. Well, one has to be careful. How does one define this? Is it what the community saying to authority all the time, I need this, I need this, I need this? Surely that's, one mustn't be too condescending and patronizing to communities to say they're unable to actually deal with, in an active way, some of their own needs. Clearly not everything. So I just want to just have a little bit of a caution about saying somebody else must come and ask them what their needs are. The whole Zwela Timber thing started from the community saying, we identify this is something important, and then developing. Then comes the other question of partnership. So we have three kinds of partnership that I've dealt with. One of them, the Improvement District, is a very flexible, adaptable way of dealing with a whole range of issues, from outright crime to cleaning to social issues, in a way which is constantly developing and able to respond quickly to particular challenges. With the Neighbourhood Watch, it has been primarily a partnership, if you like, but a rather unequal partnership between communities and the police. I'm not suggesting that that should be stopped. I think it's extremely important and beneficial if it's carried out well, but I think it has huge potential for the community world to be extended in a very peaceful and problem-solving way. And the third one was the Community Peace Programme, Peace Committees. That's an interesting one because it was community engagement very directly. The Community Peace Programme, of which I was a part, played a facilitating, monitoring role, fundraising, writing reports, and Richard would be interested. We had a monitoring built in. But the missing link, and what caused it to stop in 2009, having dealt with something like 43,000 different cases, was no continuing sustainable support from government. So that's my little contribution, trying to bring it down to some examples, which in turn I hope have raised some useful questions. So thank you very much.